Good evening, everyone. God gives us the strength to bear, but we have to embrace. God gives us the strength to bear, but we have to embrace. I thirst. We heard that in the proclamation of the gospel tonight. I thirst from Jesus. And certainly in a literal sense, he was terribly thirsty. And the response was to go and from this bucket of wine, we see in other gospels mixed with myrrh, this was a requirement by the Roman government for crucifixions. Okay, so there needed to be some sort of wine with a little bit of an anesthetic there if they requested. There was something much deeper here with regards to his request for thirst. And you might have noticed it earlier on in the gospel as well, when Peter strikes the servant's ear and Jesus said, "Shall I not drink of this cup?" Okay, what cup is he talking about? Again, Jesus' sacrifice is the sacrifice of the Passover. And the Passover meal was the saving meal of the Jewish people. Within the Passover that evening, it wasn't enough to slaughter the lamb and then to put the blood over the doorpost and the top of the door, the lintel. You needed to eat the flesh of the lamb and then partake of the wine in the Passover feast. There are 4 cups in this Passover celebration, and you must partake of all 4. When you do, then the Passover is complete, and in fact, your family will be saved. So this is what was unfolded in the Passover of the people when they left Egypt and through the Red Sea from slavery to freedom. In the Gospels, we see that Jesus drank from 3 cups. He certainly said, "This is my body given for you. This is my blood." And in the Passover meal then would be taking place, or I should say the Eucharist would be taking place of the Passover meal. He's offering him his very self. But in the course of that Passover being celebrated, it's only recorded that he drinks 3 times. So there's a 4th cup, and it signifies the completion of the sacrifice. So when he says, "I thirst," he wants the 4th cup. When he says, "I thirst," he says, "I thirst to save you." When I thirst, says, I want that 4th cup and it is finished. Again, that's why we have the ringing of the bell when we offer Mass, and we won't offer Mass tonight. But any other time when you hear Mass being offered here at St. Joseph's or Sacred Heart, you'll hear that when the priest takes a sip from the chalice, the bell will ring. And it is recalling that moment when he said, I thirst for your soul. And that the sacrifice that the priest is offering is now complete. Here on Good Friday, we stop and we realize that sacrifice that he made. I thirst for you. I thirst for your soul. I can't help but to think of that moment in the Passion of the Christ when it is depicting the Blessed Mother wanting to be with her Son in his Passion. And she relies on St. John to get her close. And then when she realizes that she's going to get close to him, she doesn't want to go there because she's going to get really close to him in his suffering. And John says, Mother, And she looks up, and just then she sees him fall down and recalls him falling as a child. And a very human moment in the mother of our Lord. And she finds in herself the strength to run to her child, who is now walking the road to Calvary. And she runs up to him and she kneels down and she says, "Jesus, I'm here, I'm here." This is the depiction and interpretation. And he turns to her and he grabs her face and he says, "Mother, look, I make all things new." And then he picks up this cross and he continues on the way to Calvary. Jesus thirsts for our souls. How does he wants to make our lives new. He wants to make all things new. How does that happen in a very real way? It happens when we bear our cross. Again, many crosses, and most of them, do not come from God. It comes from original sin and the disorder that came to the world. So we ought not think, oh, well, this cross that I have to bear, God's up there going, you have to bear that one. And I'm going to give this one to you because, well, I think you can suffer through it. Okay. The disorder in the world, many of those crosses come to us. Is it God that gives us? No, it's God who gives us the strength to bear. However, we cannot be made new in bearing our cross until we embrace it. Last night I gave the example of me being in boot camp, and I remember how it was a difficult time. I didn't think I could continue to move on. I was really questioning a lot of things. Gee, why did I do this? Really, if you talk to anybody who's gone to boot camp, they're thinking the same thing those first few weeks. And I also shared how I called home and I got a hold of my grandfather, who was not terribly happy with me entering the service, but in that moment, he knew what I needed to hear. And he drew deep within himself and he said, "Denny, I'm proud of you." That gave me a little bit of strength to continue, maybe to ask the question. See, I think there was a part of me that thought, oh, all right, I'm going to enter the military, I'm going to go there, boot camp, I'll be home for Christmas. Nothing's going to change all that much. The adolescent mind. Nothing will change. Well, the reality is, and maybe it was that encouragement from my grandfather, I had to look and say that everything is changing. Everything in my life. And I have to accept it. And when that happened, it didn't make everything easier, but from that moment on, I was moving forward. And it was a reality for me, and we all have our own stories of those epiphanies when we realize this is my road. This is my current challenge. And I can whine, and I can cry, and sometimes we do need to admit that and to lean on a friend and complain a bit. But Christ cannot make all things new in us unless we are willing to accept and embrace our cross. He thirsts. He thirsts for you and me, for our souls. It's us that he wants. And that comes about. Our whole lives are made new when we embrace our cross.